We're making homemade sourdough bread. It's super simple to make and uses everyday ingredients. I've been perfecting the recipe and technique for the last few years, and I'm so ready to share this with you. I've already done the auto release, so now I'm going to add the starter and salt, and I'm going to press it in with my fingers to incorporate it. I've wet my hands a little bit to make it easier, and that also helps dissolve the salt. I activated my starter by adding equal parts of water and flour last night. I let it sit in a warm area, so for us it's by the kitchen stove, and I also have a thermometer there to tell me what temperature it is. I let that double in size, and then I stuck it in the fridge overnight, and I just took it out in room temperature while I just showered this morning, so it was ready to go when I made bread. And I'm using a 6-quart Cambro container. These are actually made in the United States, to mix my dough rather than a bowl, but you can certainly use a bowl. This is nice because it has a lid on it, which means I can help it keep the warmth while it rises and ferments. I'm using a kitchen scale, measuring in grams, to add equal parts of lukewarm water and all-purpose flour, unbleached. Stir it together with a spatula or a wooden utensil, and that will ferment. On the counter, it'll double in size in a warm area. You can use a glass jar. I'm just using a ball mason jar. It's a 1.5 pints, so I find that it's nice. It's just the perfect size. It's slightly taller than a pint jar, and it's a wide mouth lid. I use a simple fabric square and a rubber band to secure it. This lets the jar breathe. After the starter is mixed into the dough, it'll sit for 1 hour. I'm going to do a series of stretches. Should be about 4 stretches and folds. I'm going to wet my hands so that way it doesn't stick to the dough. This is my first stretch, so it's going to be relatively a little more difficult to work with, but you'll see with each stretch it'll get easier. This is to strengthen the gluten. I rotate the Cambro container, maybe a quarter turn, wet my hand again. I'll shake it off. You don't want it too wet. Complete this process until you're completely around the entire dough round. And then this will have the cover back on it, sit in a warm area, and rest for 30 minutes. We'll repeat this process about 4 times. I also will perform a series of coil folds, and that will help the dough come into shape. Okay, I'm making several loaves of sourdough bread, and this is a larger Cambro. I got this at the restaurant supply. Look at this. So my dough is nice and ready. It's jiggly. It's risen, double in size, and now I'm going to pre-shape my loaves. These loaves are pre-shaped, and they're going to have a rest for about 20 minutes. And they look nice. You can see the air bubbles in them. Okay, so these are my bannetons, and I will flour them with rice flour. We remove the dough from the refrigerator after cold proofing overnight and up to 36 hours. I dust it lightly with flour and then a little bit of cornmeal. Carefully remove the proofing basket. Set the proofing basket aside so it can thoroughly dry. Use your hand or a pastry brush to gently brush away any excess caked on flour. Score the bread right before baking using a bread lame. Do your decorative ones first and your deep score at a 45-degree angle last. A sharp bread lame will help you easily cut into the dough. Being deep enough will allow your bread to fully expand. Remove the preheated Dutch oven. Remember, it'll be very hot, so be super careful. Remove the lid and gently place in the bread. I use the back of a pastry brush to gently press the parchment paper so the bread doesn't stick to it. Place the cover back on and bake for 20 minutes in your preheated 550-degree oven. Carefully remove the lid and continue to bake at your lowered temperature of 450 degrees for an additional 15 minutes. Place a half sheet pan under the Dutch oven for the remainder of baking. This will help prevent the bottom of the bread from burning. Carefully remove the bread from the pot and let it cool on a baking rack for a minimum of 1 to 2 hours prior to slicing. It has a beautiful exterior crust and a light, airy crumb.